On the 2nd of June 1948, inside of Landsberg Prison, a brutal and barbaric doctor was led to the gallows for his execution. He had been condemned to death the year before, during the doctor's trial, which brought a number of Nazi war criminals to trial for their actions inside of the Third Reich. But this specific war criminal was known as the Nazi Bluebeard, and he cast a notorious figure. During the Second World War, under the guise of the conflict, there were horrific medical experiments conducted on prisoners inside of the concentration camps and within Hitler's Germany. The majority of these trials had little point or gain, and only increased the suffering of the victims, who found themselves living under a state of persecution. Wolfram Sievers was a notorious Nazi who was involved in the organisation of these experiments, and for his crimes he was executed inside the American-occupied prison where many other horrific Nazi war criminals were condemned. Welcome to the Untold Past. Today we look at the justified execution of the Nazi Bluebeard, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Wolfram Sievers was born on the 10th of July 1905, and he lived in Hildesheim in his early life, and his family were rather religious. His father was a musician inside of the Protestant church, and Wolfram Sievers grew up playing many different instruments, and as a young boy he was very talented. But there would be signs early on that Wolfram Sievers would be later involved in terrible crimes. Whilst he was at high school, he was a member of the Deutsche Völkischer Schutz- und Trutzbund. This was the largest anti-Semitic group in Germany following the First World War, and the group even published books that later influenced the thinking and political opinions of high-ranking Nazis such as Heinrich Himmler. The group used a swastika as its symbol, but it disbanded in 1924 as most of the members then joined the Nazi Party. But Wolfram Sievers, for his involvement in this group, was actually expelled from his school, and he would be an active member of it. Despite being thrown out of school, he studied philosophy, history and religious studies at the Technical University of Stuttgart. But because of his early links to the anti-Semitic groups, it was clear that he would one day join the fledgling Nazi Party. Sievers had also been involved in the Bundeswehr Jugend, as well as being a prominent member of the Ottoman League, which promoted a back-to-the-land lifestyle inside of Germany. Interestingly, a number of later high-ranking members of the SS and Nazis were part of the Ottoman League, such as Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz, and he even met his wife at the group's meetings. Sievers then went on in 1929 to officially join the Nazi Party, and he got involved in much of the group's activities. However, in 1933, he was made the head of the Externsteiner Foundation, which had been set up by Heinrich Himmler. This was a group of scientists who investigated the Externsteiner in the Teutoburg forest, and it's probable that this group was set up to investigate Aryan links to a formation of rocks. This site was identified as a sacred site for the pagan Saxons, and Himmler would have ordered Sievers' group to draw links between this structure and also the Nazi master race, as he was obsessed with this sort of history. Himmler, even because of his obsession with the occult, even embarked on his own Grail quest to search for the Holy Grail. But through his work in this group, Sievers, who had become a member of the SS, was given a swift amount of promotion. He was appointed as the General Secretary of the Anna Nerba by Himmler, the archaeological group that searched for the Holy Grail, Thor's hammer, and even Atlantis. It's likely that Sievers believed much of the same nonsense that Himmler did, that by possessing these mythical items, that the Nazis could have ultimate power. Himmler even ordered the Anna Nerba to search for Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, believing that this could provide the Germans with a weapon that would blow anything their enemies would have on the battlefield out of the water. Sievers, let's remember, only studied history at university, so he was probably hired due to his SS beliefs and links and devotion to the Nazi cause, and he became the director of the Anna Nerba's operations. But when the Nazis came to power, Sievers indulged in sadistic actions inside of the SS, and then, in 1943, he was appointed the director of the Institute for Military Scientific Research. This was a group established which conducted extensive medical experiments upon humans and prisoners, and they were a subdivision of the Anna Nerba. Sievers founded the office under Himmler's orders, and inside of the concentration camps, scientists and other doctors and medical personnel were ordered to conduct barbaric experiments for the military's benefit. For example, under Sievers' oversight, Sigmund Rascher, a brutal SS doctor, was ordered to conduct investigations for the Luftwaffe to see what was safe for their pilots. He conducted high-altitude experiments inside of Dachau on prisoners, and he placed inmates inside vacuum chambers to test their bodies and limits. He also conducted experiments to see how long an airman could survive if they were shot down in freezing cold water. His victims were left in freezing weather for 14 hours, and were even submerged in ice-cold water for 3 hours. Because of these experiments, dozens of prisoners died in the most horrific ways, and Rascher was even tasked to experiment upon wounds. His prisoners or test subjects were shot through the neck and chest, and even had limbs amputated, but this was all being overseen by Wolfram Sievers, and he was later charged with the gathering of a Jewish skull and skeleton collection, which resulted in 112 Jewish men and women being slaughtered and their skeletons were then macerated. At the end of the Second World War, there was a hunt on for a number of high-ranking members of the SS, and Wolfram Sievers was arrested. Let's remember that he was not a soldier, and neither did he see much action, if any, fighting the enemies of the Nazis. But he was later brought to the doctor's trial to answer for his crimes alongside men such as Karl Brandt, Hitler's personal doctor, and Karl Gebhardt, Himmler's personal doctor. He was referred to as the Nazi Bluebeard due to his appearance, as he had a thick, inch-black beard, and he answered charges regarding human experimentation with pleas of not guilty. He was also accused of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and being a member of the SS. He claimed that in 1933 he had been part of anti-Nazi resistance that planned to assassinate and take out Heinrich Himmler and Adolf Hitler, and he tried to make out he was an assassin who was tasked to track the movements of Himmler. He also stated that he remained in this role, organising human experiments to get as much intelligence and information about the Nazis as possible so they could be one day overthrown. But of course this was delusion and nonsense, and Sievers, who had a long history of being involved in Nazi-style groups, was sentenced to death for his crimes. He was sent to Landsberg Prison, which was occupied by the American forces, to await his death sentence. He had to wait almost a year on death row, alongside a number of other brutal war criminals. But on the 2nd of June 1948, Wolfram Sievers was summoned from his prison cell, and he was told that his execution would be performed imminently. He was led out into a courtyard where the gallows stood tall, and accompanying him were dozens of military policemen, and he had his identity confirmed at the bottom of the steps of the execution structure. Sievers was then led up the gallows, and he was handed over to the executioner. He checked that his arms had been secured, and he then threw a black cap over Sievers' head, before he was shuffled over the trapdoor, and the noose was then attached. Within minutes of being led out into the execution courtyard, the executioner released the trapdoor, and Wolfram Sievers was executed. His death was confirmed a number of minutes later. Wolfram Sievers was a barbaric war criminal, a member of the Nazi Party, who oversaw the organisation of a number of terrible medical experiments that resulted in the deaths and destructions of hundreds of people. He tried to make out during his trial that he was part of a covert spying operation who planned to take out Himmler and even Hitler, but of course this was so far from the reality of his true idea and beliefs. He was a man who had for some time been part of pro-Nazi groups, and his actions resulted in a huge degree of suffering and terror during the Second World War. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.